than in rural regions. So the proportion. And then if you go to university, this number is 4 times. So for the same number of people in rural and in region, the enrollment into universities in urban regions is 4 times higher than in rural regions. So those things shows a very, very big urban income, urban-rural education gap. Now, of course, we have some, this is example to show you the gap. This is in a city, in Yichang City. This picture was taken by a journalist from Xinhua News Agent, and this is not a typical rural area at all. This is a city, although it's a second or third tier city. What those people, these are the migrants' kids. So when their parents migrate to cities to work, and then their kids cannot enter the schools in urban regions because either by very high tuition fees or they just don't have the right to enter the school. So this man, because he's disabled, so he voluntarily offered some courses for all these kids. So they live. So those kids was living around this area and just come to him, and then he offered some free education to him. And this is very recent. It's actually taken February 24th, 2009 by Xinhua News Agent, the official Chinese news agent. So you can get an idea of how severe urban-rural gap in terms of education. Okay. Of course, there's some other gaps. Healthcare, for example, in urban regions, most people have been covered by their employers before, even in the reform period and then before the reform period. But in rural areas, only towards the end of the pre-reform period, rural people start to have universal coverage. But this system was collapsed after the reform because when the people's commune being dismantled, this system collapsed. So only very recently, after 2006, Chinese government introduced this new cooperative medical insurance system, and then start to cover some part of rural population, so that government will pay 60% of the cost when somebody is in hospital, but still left rural people 40% to pay for their cost. So in this case, many people, when they get ill, when they need to do very serious operation, they cannot afford to do so, and then the hospitals cannot afford to have them. So many people either don't go to hospital and they just bear the pain by themselves, and then sometimes even die with some illness, which shouldn't cause the death. Okay, and of course there's some other dimensions. For example, employment. Employment is very important, as you can see from pre-reform period. In urban, I'll give you some very brief idea. In urban regions, constantly the unemployment rate is about 4%. Yes, in urban regions. Sometimes 5%, but on average 4%. But in rural area, you see a large size of surplus labor. When we say surplus labor, we mean those labor basically have nothing to do. They want to work, but they don't have opportunities to work previously. This is why we call them surplus labor. Nowadays, of course, they can migrate, but when they migrate, they cannot become part of the urban. So they face discriminations. So detail, you can download this paper from a website, from CRPC website, because this was one of the conference papers for details, but I won't have time to go through all of this. And then, child care guide. What we mean by child care and is this. Urban regions, mostly, of course, when parents go to work, they have to let their kids either to kindergartens or to school, and then when they come home, normally they are able to meet their kids and discuss their discussions to give them emotional support after school. But in rural regions, it is very difficult for some people to do so, especially for those migrant workers. Because migrant workers, when they migrate, as you say in many documentaries and as you say from many statistics, when they migrate, they often migrate by their own. For example, a couple migrants, they left behind the kids behind, so that we have those thing called left behind children. Have you ever heard of this concept? Yes? So-called left behind children. Roughly, I'll give you a data by the Federation of Women Exercise that in 2008, 2007, roughly there were 58 million people between 0 years old to 17 years old being left behind by their children. 58 million. And there are 40 million left behind children under 14 years old. So think about the scale. 40 million children under 14 years old being left behind by their parents, because their parents has to go to urban regions to earn a living. So when this case being left behind, they don't have support. Either, of course, they have some financial support because their parents can send some money back for them to go to school, for them to have some other consumption, but they don't have emotional support, they don't have anything. And if you watch, there are many documentaries record all this phenomena, and they cause many problems. Very high crime, very low education level for all those kids. So there are all sorts of social problems that these people have. And then now, perhaps access to public services is also an issue here. In urban regions, when you say, for example, the picture of Beijing, the picture of Shanghai, all those high-rise buildings, all those roads, public infrastructure were funded by the central government and by different levels of government. But in rural regions, traditionally, rural people have to contribute their own infrastructure. So when they want to build a school, they have to collect their money from their fellow villagers. And when they build a road, they have to do so. They get very little public funding from the government. So now when you think of Beijing Olympics and think of Shanghai Expo, actually a huge amount, and also now the Asia Olympics in Guangdong, you see huge public investment in all those cities, but very little investment has been injected into rural regions. So this is why you say this guy is actually generated by the government itself, and then why many people want to move to urban Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangdong? It is because by moving there, you are able to get a share of those public infrastructure, which is invested by the government. So as a taxpayer or as a citizen, you contribute to the country, but the country gives disproportionate of money to some certain cities, and then this drives young people, drives many people want to move to that specific city. This, of course, causes very high housing price, very high, for example, public problems. The congestion in Beijing is very severe, as many of you know, and as many of you experience, perhaps. It's partly because of this strategy. If you invest all the money there, of course, people want to go there to get a share out of it. Okay, so environmental gap, we won't have time to do so, but I'll leave you if we want to have some deeper discussion afterwards. So now, we want to do some analysis about all those gaps, where it comes from, how can we solve